Okay, well, welcome everybody to Solar Noon Tuesday. I'm Jay Warmke with solarpvtraining.com. And this is essentially a program where we talk about what's been happening in the solar industry this week, the news compiled by the American Solar Energy Society. And then we try and just update you as to what webinars are coming up and then hit on a topic, a subject that we can do a little bit of a deep dive. And this year we're going to be looking, or this week, we're going to be looking at EnergySage's report on 2023, just the state of the industry, where we're at. And there's some interesting insights into that. So let's go ahead and jump straight on into the news for the week of March 10th. And 2023 was another banner year for solar. We saw that solar added about 33.8 gigawatts. That's a 67% increase over the year before. And while solar was doing great, wind actually had its slowest growth year in about a decade. And solar jumped down here in my notes, but I think it's only about a 6% growth rate. Solar energy accounted for about 52% of all of the new energy on the grid that was added in 2023. Renewables in total, basically the three big renewable energy systems today are solar, wind, and batteries or energy storage on the grid. Those three things accounted for about 77% of all of the new energy generation put on the US grid in 2023. And now renewable energy accounts for about 25% of all of the electricity that's generated or that's used within the nation each and every year. The recent report from CEA and Wood Mackenzie projected that this strong growth that we saw last year is going to continue over the foreseeable future. They project that in 2024, we're going to add about 36 gigawatts. That's a little bit more than was added in 2023. And then it will increase each year, the amount that gets added to the grid until about 2032. At which point they're projecting that it's going to be adding about 60 or in excess of 60 gigawatts each and every year. To put that into perspective, the US currently has about 161 gigawatts of installed capacity. So if these projections are true, essentially every 4 years, or over the next 4 years, we're looking at more than doubling the installed capacity here in the US. The manufacturing of solar panels in the US has doubled the capacity to do so anyway. In 2023 system, they added about 8 gigawatts of capacity for manufacturing panels. That brings the total up to about 16 gigawatts of solar capacity. This is primarily a result of the Inflation Reduction Act, where they give a 10% bonus for domestically manufactured solar panels or components when you're installing the system, a 10% additional tax incentive, a tax credit. And they reported in the same report from Wood Mackenzie that of all of the residential systems that were installed in the US, 13% of them included energy storage, and non-residential, it was about 5%. They're looking at that increasing dramatically this year, where they anticipate about 25% of the residential will actually incorporate storage, and about 10% of the non-residential will incorporate storage. On the legislative front, Senator John Ossoff, a Democrat from Georgia, has joined with about 10 other Democratic senators to call for the mute some folks here. Have called for Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, to include U.S. wafers in that domestic content incentive program, the tax credits. Basically, when you manufacture solar panels, it goes through a number of stages. There's the ore, the polysilicon that's mined, and then that polysilicon is refined into pure silicon ingots. Those ingots are then sliced into wafers. Those wafers are transformed into cells, and the cells are then compiled into modules or panels. Well, currently the legislation in the IRA for domestic content says the panels and the cells have to be manufactured here in America to qualify. What the senators are saying is we want to push that one step back in the construction process, in the production process, and require that the wafers themselves are actually produced here in the United States as well. Currently, there's no capacity to manufacture cells or wafers in the United States. So this is a bit of a theoretical exercise at the moment. But what they're trying to do is obviously incentivize that capacity. Currently, China controls about 98% of all of the world's ingot and wafer production. So that's clearly who that's aimed at. The Department of the Treasury and the IRS just announced this past week they further defined some of the rules around the tax credits, how you take advantage of those from the IRA for solar. That's what we're talking about, but it's other renewable energy and energy efficiency systems as well. The current IRA rules say that for residential systems, you get a credit of about 30%. So if you paid $10,000 for your system, you would get $3,000 as a tax credit. That's not a deduction, it's a credit. So if you owed $4,000 in taxes, now you'd only owe $1,000. So it's a dollar for dollar kind of thing. Now, in the past, nonprofits and governmental bodies could not take advantage of this because they didn't pay taxes. And since it was a tax credit, well, with the IRA, they said, all right, we want to incentivize you guys as well. So we will issue direct payments, or essentially rebates from the federal government. So if you're a nonprofit and you spend $10,000 on the system, you'll actually get a check from the government for $3,000 in lieu of your tax credit. Businesses that are for-profit businesses that don't need the tax credits. So let's say you've got a lot of deductions, or you're not making a profit or whatever, that tax credit's not going to help you either. Well, under the new guidelines, you can actually sell those tax credits to third parties, and the income from that sale would be considered as tax exempt. So these are some of the rules that are out there that are being better defined. And for commercial entities, you can actually get additional tax credits over and above the 30%. There's the 10% for domestic content. There's 10% if you happen to be located in an energy community. And an energy community is really defined as one that was dependent on fossil fuels for employment or income in that region, or if it's adjacent to or nearby to a closed coal power plant or a coal mine. So I always think of this as the Joe Manchin provision to get this over, where basically all of West Virginia and Southern Ohio, where we live, qualify as energy communities. And the Department of Commerce recently this week released preliminary findings, and they're saying that China, Indonesia, Mexico, and Turkey have been subsidizing their extruded aluminum industries to the point where they can create an unfair competitive advantage when those products are imported into the U.S. This is a first step in creating a situation where tariffs are imposed on these kind of products. And where this impacts the solar industry is that the rails where we install and the panel frames, those are primarily made from extruded aluminum. So we may begin to see tariffs imposed on those materials as these products are being manufactured. The final determination on this is expected to be in July of this year. And that's all the news that I have. Does anybody else have anything they want to add to that they've run across this week? give you just a second since we have this kind of interactive process here. Okay, well, yeah.
Did you see that news item that in the state of New York is considering providing additional incentives for residential solar installers? I don't remember the details, but there was news making the rounds. You hear anything about that?
No, I didn't see anything on that. No, I'll have to take a look into that. Maybe I can report on that next week if there's something popping up there in New York.
Jay, Senate Bill 3596B. And the benefit goes from 5,000 to 10,000.
But if benefit for what? What are they incentivizing?
Tax incentive.
So you get a deduction off of your state taxes then? Oh, okay. All right. Well, that's good. That's good. All right. So announcements from this week in the webinars and the like. Today, March 12th at 2:00 today, there's an IRA and apprenticeship programs webinar put on by CEA, the Solar Energy Industries Association. GoodWe is talking about their solar energy storage system. That's on March 13th. That would be tomorrow. Have to keep my dates straight. AEP is offering a webinar on the 13th also about their commercial charging station rates. So if you're in an AEP region, one of the issues with EV charging is the whole demand charge setup. So if you were running, say, a gas station and you wanted to put in some commercial charging stations, you might find that your electric bill doubles if one person charges one car one time just because of the demand charges. So my hope is, and I'm going to attend this webinar just to find out, are they going to modify that, for EV charging stations where there's not such a punitive tariff imposed when you're trying to set up these commercial charging stations? I'm skeptical that they're being all benevolent about this, but we'll see. We'll see. All right, March 13th, 11:30, utility scale solar storage. This is from Solar Power World. The 14th at noon, community resilience. So Solar United Neighbors, this is a group of people that try and incentivize residential homeowners to put out collective bids on solar installations. Well, they're talking about basically how do you create resiliency within your community. And the 18th through the 21st in Raleigh, North Carolina, NABCEP will be having their conference there if you're interested in that. Although I think I saw an email just recently that they've sold out. So if you're not already registered, they may lock you out if you show up trying to buy a ticket. Who knows? I'm probably wrong about that. And now they're mad that I've told everybody not to show up. All right, March 21st at 11 a.m. What is the role of corporate and financial players in clean energy? This one's coming from Reuters. Data in utility scale solar on the 21st at 2 p.m. The green workforce discussion from IREC, that's going to be on the 21st at 2 p.m. These are usually roundtable discussions. I assume it's the same kind of format. I've sat in on some of those where they ask people for their input, they report certain things. So, it's very participatory if you want to join in there. March 26th, 2 p.m., preparing your community for solar. This is from the Energy Coalition of Ohio. I'm wondering if maybe this one is a response. I know here in Ohio, we're seeing a lot of pushback solar on prime farmland. I wonder if this is a way of helping folks to go out there to their local politicians, their local community and say, hey guys, let's try and sort of preparing the ground as solar expands so that you reduce some of the resistance, which is becoming more and more political. The 26th, permitting and inspections. This is another one coming in from IREC. The 20th through the 23rd is the ACES conference at George Washington University in Washington, D.C. ACES is the American Solar Energy Society, and they'll be having their big event there that week. I intend on being there, so we'll see you there. And June 12th, 13th, Solar and Storage Energy Summit in San Francisco. And I'm afraid I'm not intending on being there, so you're on your own if you show up out there. Okay. Then, of course, there's our courses that are online and in person. You can find those at solarpvtraining.com. And if you're interested, we just started a class at Eastern West Virginia Community College. You're welcome to join in there. You can contact them. We got one coming up in Marietta. So it's still time to jump in on those. And that's all of the events. Did anybody else have anything that came across their desk? Give you a chance to shout out on that.
Jay, I saw you mention in the news about service stations implementing EV charging. And you're looking at the possibility the electricity cost will increase. In Trinidad, we have a situation where a lot of our service stations want to implement level 3 charging. But what was prohibitive for them was the cost to change the electrical infrastructure from split phase to do 400 volts or 400. It was so expensive, most of them decided that it's too costly at the moment to make that changes.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So what you're saying is in Trinidad anyway, just the voltage of the system and I'm sure the amount of amps, you'd have to change over the service from your utility. And that's a big problem too. Plus the cost of those level 3 charging stations is very expensive. I've seen $50,000 to $100,000 for those units. So that's going to be a big challenge as people move into the electric vehicle marketplace, trying to get a widespread network of level 3 chargers out there and available to the general public. I don't think the level 1 or the level 2, those aren't going to be a real big problem, but the level 3 fast chargers, that's going to be a challenge. Okay. All right. Well, this week, the deep dive item that we thought we would talk about here is really just kind of recapping the EnergySage annual report. It's sort of the time of year when all of these companies come out with their annual reports about what happened last year. EnergySage has one of the good ones. I know CEA has one that they put out with Wood Mackenzie. They're all good and they're slightly different, which is always kind of interesting. All the numbers are a bit different. It's sort of like political polls. They're kind of all over the place. And I don't know, maybe we take the average of the polls. But this one here from EnergySage, one thing that's interesting is that for the first time since COVID, really, we've seen a decrease in the price of systems. So we saw that the system prices dropped about 3.5% year on year. So that's good. We did see really once COVID took hold, there were a lot of supply chain disruptions, and that was what was blamed for a lot of the cost increases. People simply couldn't get product. Now, apparently, that's worked itself through the system, and we're beginning to see this slow decline in prices once again. You know, perhaps that will continue. The average cost nationwide for residential solar, according to this report, was $2.80 per watt. That's the average for across the residential spectrum. And I do want to encourage people to jump in if you've got comments on this, because of course it is a discussion, but I would just point out, I don't see those prices. You know, I mean, each year EnergySage says that this is the average cost, and each year I see that the costs are a little bit higher than that. CEA, they say $3.40 is the average for residential in their report. I think it's somewhere between the two. You know, that's sort of my impression, somewhere closer to the $3, $3.10 range. And it varies significantly from state to state. I did just make a note here that 65% of the costs are soft costs, which to me, it seems pretty astounding. It wasn't too long ago that it was 50-50. that 50% hard costs, or the cost of the equipment, the panels, the inverters, things like that, and 50% for customer acquisition, permitting, installation, profits, design, all of those kind of things. So now it's more like 2/3 soft costs, 1/3 hard costs. So it seems like if we're going to be saving money in the future on the installation of solar, all of those savings, really, not all of them, but most of them are going to come from the soft cost world. We're going to have to figure out how to reduce those.
I would like to chime in on that subject. That's actually a subject that I feel pretty strongly about. We do our projects anywhere from about 280 to about 315 per watt, depending on site challenges and special, needs of a certain site. We actually do, a lot of people don't believe it, but we do our ground mounts for less than we do the rooftop systems. There's these installers out here charging $3.50 to $4 a watt, and even greater. It's usually because they're using salespeople that are making about 10 to 20,000 off each deal. I think it's pretty ugly the way that they're doing that myself. I operate a business where I don't have salespeople. Whenever people call me, they're talking to the guy that's going to do the install. But yeah, there's 65% soft costs, I think, are outrageous for them to claim that. It shouldn't cost a salesperson $20,000 to close a deal. But that's truly, like, what you're saying is exactly what I'm seeing out of some of our competitors. So I recently bid against a company that was providing an 8 kilowatt system for $80,000.
Oh, geez.
And it was on a rooftop of a house that was not fit for solar. It was a 1940s farmhouse. It never would have gotten 8 kilowatt on the roof anyway, simply because there wasn't the space. I mean, it looked like it on the map, but because of the angle, there just wasn't the space. And there's these people that are out here. This company was out of Virginia, selling the deal. Once they sold that deal, I don't know what a contractor is going to do with that, because they don't even have trusses on the roof. It's just a hand built roof from the 1940s. I mean, they had no business putting solar on that. And the homeowner wanted to maintain the original metal, it looked like from the 1940s. And I said, yeah, we're doing a ground mount for you, but, and the lady said, now, how are they doing? I said, I tell you, they're just lying to you. There's no way an 8 kilowatt system can provide 26,000 kilowatt hours. Our system was a 21 kilowatt tilt adjustable ground mount, slated to provide 26,000 kilowatt hours a year. And, I'm like, okay, we're doing a 21 kilowatt system and they're doing an 8. And the lady said, well, now they did say that they're using the most state-of-the-art panels that are available. I'm like, okay,
Yeah, 150% efficient panels.
Yeah. I'm like, their software is just a little bit off there, dear.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you bring that up, Taylor, because I had a conversation with a fellow over the weekend from Pennsylvania, and he was telling me that he's looking at solar and he's had 3 or 4 companies show up at his door to sell him solar. And he liked the one guy, and it's gonna, he's moving forward with it, and it's not going to cost him anything. And I kept telling him, man, just, if someone shows up at your door, don't buy it from him. I mean, this is not something that you should sell, door to door that way. I mean, maybe the person's legitimate, but the odds are not.
Right.
If you want solar on your home, it just reminds me of something my dad told me when I was in my 20s. He said about life insurance. He said, life insurance should never be sold. It should always be bought. In other words, if you want it, go out and buy it, but don't let somebody sell it to you.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. So I don't think he believed me. By the time I was done, I kept saying, man, but he says, it's not going to cost me anything. And I said, you know what? I think it's gonna cost you something.
Yeah. These salespeople, they are great at what they do. I've talked to many homeowners that, called me and said, hey, my system isn't producing what it's supposed to be, and I've talked to them on the phone for a while and helped them do some troubleshooting. I've actually worked on a couple projects where the systems are actually not working. That was, the whole pink energy deal, how all that went down. But, they're sold these 8 kilowatt systems for 80 to 90,000. And they're not, they're just not going to pay back. It's just not there. So I don't want to discourage people from going solar. I mean, of course I want to encourage it. I was encouraging people to go solar before I became a contractor, and doing it for people. But at the same time, people really need to be careful.
Yeah, unfortunately, we're getting into that mode at the moment of, the aluminum siding salespeople running around, and Pink Solar was one of them. I know there were others before them, and there will be others that come after them. It's just, the shysters who go out there and sell people a bill of goods. And then for the most part, what they do, I mean, a lot of these guys are selling financing, and then once they're done, they've made their commission, and then it's up to somebody else to clean up the mess. So
yeah. And then ask, well, I didn't get the check from the federal government, like the salesman said. Yeah, that's not the way it works.
no, I know, if they own it, they get the check. Yeah.
Yeah. But they don't actually get the paycheck, or I'm sorry, they don't get a check. They just get a credit. So, if somebody doesn't have that much tax liability, you can't get $20,000 a check from the federal government,
Sure.
and that's what the salespeople tell people. They say, oh yeah, you're going to get your rebate check. You'll be able to pay down this loan, all this.
Yeah, I've given talks, and occasionally you'll get somebody in the audience, and they go, when I tell them that this is a tax credit, and they go, well, that's not fair. I'm a senior citizen and I don't pay taxes. And I say, you're right. It's not fair that you don't pay taxes, but they don't appreciate me saying that. But anyway, that's
Yeah.
all right. Well, when we talk about the highest and the lowest, and I think you're confirming that 280 to 310 depends on the size of the system. I've got a slide there, but there's a lot of other factors. When people come to me and say, how much does solar cost? I mean, that's kind of a, oh, that's weird. It just asked me if I was speaking Arabic here. I thought my enunciation was clear. So anyway, it's like saying, how much does a house cost, or how much does a car cost? I mean, it depends on so many factors. But in Tennessee, that's the highest average cost according to the survey, coming in at $3.65 a watt, and the lowest is in Arizona, $2.30 a watt. And I should point out that all of these costs that we're talking about are for simple grid-tied systems with no energy storage. And I'm assuming also, although they don't say this, that it's a rooftop system, because as Taylor pointed out, most times you do a ground-mounted system, it's going to cost more than a rooftop system because you're paying for the support structure of the array. Whereas with a roof, assuming the roof's in good condition, you're not paying those costs. You're just putting it right there on the roof.
Where we see the savings is in the not having to use microinverters. And it's about a wash as far as equipment is between a ground mount and a roof mount because of that.
Oh, okay. Are you using Solar Edge primarily, or are you using some other string inverter system?
We have been using Fronius,
Uh-huh.
SMA, and Solarc.
Okay. And you do the Solarc even when you're doing grid connection?
We've done both. We've actually been getting a lot of ground mounts, off grid jobs, simply because the power companies are telling people that are building these new houses, if they have to set 3 poles, you're talking about $55,000 to $65,000. So we're taking them off the grid for that, and they have no power bill after that, so it works out pretty good.
Sure. Yeah, I've gotten a number of people contact me recently with that exact situation. It's like, they want 50 grand for me to hook up to the grid. Why would I do that? I can provide my own system.
for 60 to 70, you could get a pretty well bulletproof system. Yeah. So
Mhm.
And if you're that far off the road, you're the last person who's going to get reconnected when the power goes out. That's how I did it.
exactly.
Uh-huh. Yeah, you would never know that these guys are from West Virginia and Kentucky here, right? Taylor and Don. So
Just a
Don,
coincidence.
your system's been off grid. How long has it been operating?
The beginning of 21 or 20, I can't remember. I have to think. I turned it on at the end of December, one of those years, so I get the tax credit. I think it was 20. So it's beginning of 21.
Okay. And any problems? I know you mentioned something about generators or something at one point, but for the most part, it's been pretty smooth.
Everything's been pretty smooth. The only thing that is a little disappointing is I didn't use lithium-ion batteries, and the battery system I had was fine. It was big enough. The problem was the batteries are wearing out quicker than expected because when I went back and talked to them, the way that the battery is rated, obviously, the quicker you put the battery in, the quicker you charge it and discharge it, the quicker it'll wear out. The batteries, once we did the calculation, were rated to like charge over 2 days to make it work. I'm like, well, this is an off-grid system. It'll never charge over 2 days. This would only work if you were on grid and we're just topping it up. I'm like, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah. Well, the C20 rating is supposed to be a charge and discharge over a 20-hour period.
Right.
It's sort of the standard rating. So that's really what they should have been speccing it at.
I would agree.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Right. Yep.
Yep. Okay, well, this diagram here just showed I put it up here so that you could sort of see where your system differs from the national average there. If it's cheaper all the way down to Arizona, the more expensive Tennessee. So just left that up for a second. I'm always fascinated because living here in Ohio seems to have this desire to be mediocre. We're always sort of right in the middle of all of these things. So the top 5 states for residential solar: California, number 1, they're showing at about 270 a watt. Florida, actually number 2 now, 235 a watt. So quite inexpensive there. Texas, 235. Colorado, the 4th largest installer of residential, 310. And then Nevada. And then when we get down into the rounding out the top 10, New York, number 6. Indiana, which is always a surprise to me and a fairly expensive state to be installing solar. Ohio, number 8, we're right there at 275. And once again, I'll just reiterate, that's not been my experience for residential at 275, but maybe that's because I focus a lot on Enphase, and Enphase tends to be a little bit more expensive. North Carolina, 271, and then Georgia rounding out the top 10. All right, some data by states. This drills down just a wee little bit. These are those top 10 states for solar. And it is curious to see how different the size is of systems. It doesn't surprise me that California, for the most part, is pretty much the smallest systems that are installed nationwide, because California, where the people live anyway, tend to have fairly temperate climates. So I don't think they use that much electricity compared to those places that are very hot or very cold. Florida, pretty large system. Again, not surprisingly, heat in the summer, and those are primarily air conditioning, is electric. Texas, same thing. Colorado, a little less so, and all the way down. If you look at it, they did make a point of stating that only 3 of the states in the top 10 have higher than the national average price for electricity. Those 3 states would be California. You can see the average electric cost in the state of California is 29.41 cents per kilowatt hour. Very high, double pretty much of the national average. The other state there is New York with high electric rates, 22.72. And then the third one, just barely, is Ohio. The national average is 15.73. Ohio's in there at 15.74. And those numbers, at least for the Ohio one where I'm very familiar, that seems about right. I see a lot of electric pricing in the 16, 15 cent a kilowatt hour range here. So that gives you a little bit different insight there. The systems are getting larger. Each year, it seems that the size of these systems get bigger. Kentucky, far and away the biggest. I'm not sure what's going on there in Kentucky, Don, why your systems have to be so big, but apparently they are. Compared to California, at just about 8 kW for a California system. The larger the system, the lower the cost per watt. That pretty much makes sense. So if you're only putting in a 2 or 3 kW system, you're going to pay a premium for that because all of the costs associated, all the fixed costs are going to be the same. You get up around a 10, 12 kW system, then you're getting down into that $2.80, $2.90 per watt. And I did find it interesting in the report. They're saying the payback period is just around 8 years for these systems. I'm assuming that's unsubsidized. They didn't really say that. I don't know if that includes the tax credit or not. I always used to just in my mind hold this 7-year payback. So that number surprised me just a little bit. When I do some evaluations for commercial systems that are taking advantage of all of the tax credits, the 30% plus the 10% for an energy community, plus depreciation of the system. And then if they qualify for a REAP grant, which can be as much as 50%, then a lot of these systems are, the payback is a year or somewhere between a year and 2 years. But obviously, if you're getting a 50% grant, that's gonna make a huge impact.
Yeah, Jay, I've always been puzzled by those numbers. The systems that we install, like I said, looking at 280 to 310, depending on distance and of course all the other factors. I'm showing my customers an estimated payback period between 11 and 13 years. Our larger systems are usually a little better payback. Obviously, economies of scale. They get that lower cost per watt. But I don't have my software set up to show anything less than about 11. I mean, about the best I can do is about 11 years. Know how they're showing anything better than that.
Does your software incorporate the 30% tax credit, or are you doing this unsubsidized?
That is with the 30%. Yes.
Huh.
So I've actually checked the math of my own software and made my own spreadsheet just to make sure that I was, giving people the true numbers, and I've come up with the same figure every time. Yeah, the 7-year payback is, I think, good if you're doing it by, like a DIY. I don't know how you could pay $280 a watt and get paid back in 7 years with solar.
Well, some of that may have to do with the widely disparate cost of electricity. You're down there in West Virginia.
Yes.
Your cost is probably in the 15-cent range, I would assume.
Exactly.
And California being up around 30 cents. And California has been a large portion. So whenever you're doing averages, if California is half the country's installs, it's going to skew those numbers.
Okay, that was based nationwide. I missed that, I guess. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. Hawaii is also a big installer of solar, and I think their electric prices are closer to 50 cents a kilowatt hour. So yeah, I think it's fair to say you got to drill down locally to find out what your payback is actually going to be. Another thing that they tend to do in a lot of that software is they build in an escalator cost on the electric pricing.
Yes.
So they're often putting in 2% or 3%, saying each year the price of electricity is going to go up this amount. I don't know. I feel uncomfortable about that. They'll say historically that's been the case and we should factor that in. And you go, well, historically, you're talking like the last 5 years. So, 5 years does not a trend make. Who knows? We should be seeing declining costs in electricity because the cost to the utilities through renewables is substantially less than the cost of generating through coal and nuclear and even natural gas. So I think from a macro scale, we should be seeing declining costs of electricities, but because these businesses are monopolies, they tend to keep pushing the price up. I ran into we were doing a negotiation on a power purchase agreement, and it's kind of interesting because they were saying, okay, this is going to be the cost. It's less than the cost of your local utility. And we put a 2% escalator into that cost of electricity. And I was saying, well, will you guarantee that the cost of the electricity from this system will always be less than could be purchased from the local utility? And the contractor was saying, well, but that's always the case. The utilities have been escalating at about a 3%. We're only going to escalate it at 2%. So we should see an increasing margin between what we're charging and what the utility will charge. And I said, oh, you know what? I don't disagree. Can you put that in writing? You're telling me to be confident that that's the case. I'm telling you, I want you to guarantee it. And it's funny because they sort of got a little bit nervous at that point. So it's fine for us to guarantee it, but not so fine for them to guarantee it. Because who knows, somebody may come up with low cost fusion energy, and all of a sudden the cost of electricity from the grid is zero. And you've engaged in this 25-year power purchase agreement, and you're going to look like an idiot because you're paying a lot more money. I don't think fusion's on the horizon, but as I said, we should be seeing a declining cost as utilities transition over to renewables. We're just not seeing it right now. But yep. Yeah, go ahead, Don.
No, I was just curious. You were just mentioning a minute ago the different rates in the states. What is the average electricity rate for the U.S.?
It's 15.73 cents per kilowatt hour.
Okay, because I just pulled up my energy bill and it's only 8.5.
Well, you are getting a good deal.
Okay.
Well, is that the generation rate or is that the total rate?
I think they add an extra hundredth of a percent, 6/100th. It's the energy charge.
Yeah, because there's energy, there's distribution, and there's transmission.
No.
And all of those get added together.
Okay.
Who is the provider we're talking about?
It's a co-op. It's Bluegrass Energy.
Okay. Well, yeah. Based on your volume too, I would, if you came to me with a bill that you're paying 8 cents a kilowatt hour, I would tell you that going solar is a great thing for the environment.
I would agree. When I did the numbers, because I got my numbers when I calculated them were like yours. It was more like 11 or more years. Now I understand why.
Yeah.
I just thought people were giving us BS.
Well, don't take what they're saying as their rate. What I always do is just take the bill and divide it by the number of kilowatts, kilowatt hours used, and that's the number that I believe. They tell you they'll often only want to cite the generation charge, which is at this point usually a third to half of your overall bill.
Okay.
So you may be, if you just simply take and you can deduct out your access charge if you want to, but I just say, I figure they're getting that money too. So this is how much I'm paying them. So,
well, this is for a cabin I have, Jay, so it doesn't use much, but the facility charge is $17 and the actual energy charge is $2.
Oh, okay. Yeah. That sounds like my gas bill. So
yeah,
my natural gas bill here at the office, it's like, the access charge is $44 a month, and the amount of gas I used was like $1.50. So
that sounds right.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I didn't really get off topic. I was just curious.
Okay, doke. Well, I've got storage. Storage prices are also declining. We're seeing storage more and more in the industry. This year we saw the decline all the way down to 12.65 per kilowatt hour for the, well, I don't know if that's per kilowatt hour. That seems way too, yeah, it is dollars per kilowatt hour stored. Oh, okay. So it's not the KW. Yeah. So anyway, they're declining slightly. And when you look at who these manufacturers are, which systems are being installed? Well, first and foremost, really with about 40% of the market is Enphase. Makes sense once we get into the inverter thing. If you're going to use an Enphase system, you've got to use the Enphase storage system. It's just, that's the only one it's compatible with. So Enphase is a relatively pricey storage system, but it's also the dominant one that's going out there into residential. Tesla is in second place, and the Tesla Powerwalls, I think we're all familiar with those. That's second. There were some other ones like the Franklin. I had never actually heard of them before. Before this, I looked them up. Relatively inexpensive battery system. Then SunPower, that's another proprietary type system. A lot of people, especially up in the New York area, looking at SunPower. I know they're big there. The thing that I found interesting is how Solar Edge, their battery system that which I always believed was just an LG Chem battery with a Solar Edge label on it. And I can't be convinced otherwise. So you sort of put those two numbers together, Solar Edge and LG Energy Storage. That's all one system, really. And it's declining. It's declining significantly as far as market share. I think, again, another notable takeaway there is it's becoming more competitive in the storage world. More players coming into it. For a long, long time, it was Tesla, Solar Edge, Enphase, and then a few others. That's changing. That's changing now. Why are people installing batteries? Well, of course, the main reasons are backup power. You know, if the grid goes down, that's still a significant reason if your grid is unreliable. Then another one is self-supply. And I think the reason we saw such a jump last year, self-supply, what this basically means is saying, rather than me sell the power back to the utility, I'm going to use it. I'm going to store it when I'm generating it, and I'm going to use it myself. And the reason why that's jumping up is because the utilities are changing their net metering agreements to basically say, we're going to sell to you at retail, we're going to buy from you at wholesale. So it just makes logical sense as a customer. You say, well, why would I sell it to you at wholesale and then buy it back from you at retail? I'll just keep it and use it as much as I can. So you store excess energy in the middle of the afternoon, you use your battery in the evening, the next day you recharge it, you know, you're just using it, you're self-consuming. So that's another reason there. And of course, saving on utility rates, that's primarily when you're in an area that's got time of day pricing. So if you've got high demand, you would simply use either what you're generating or what you've stored. When the cost of electricity falls because demand for the grid is down, then you can recharge or buy from the utility. So it's another form of self-consumption, but it's based on pricing. So, and these systems are all pretty much smart enough where you can program them under any of those scenarios. So those are the main reasons, but the big jump is in the self-supply, and that's just because utilities are messing around with their net metering. Who are the top panels out there in the world of residential? Well, REC Group, Q cells, those are the two main ones. That fills up about 50%. Then you start going up into the Silfab, Panasonics of the world, the Canadian Solars, the Wari. That's a fairly new company there, Wari, but they're picking up. I think they're a premium brand, so you know, maybe for the high enders out there, whereas I'm cheap by nature, so I'll always go with the low cost. And the top inverters, this is one I like to follow relatively closely. Again, for a long time, it's been a battle between Solar Edge and Enphase as the dominance. But what we're really seeing is Enphase market share is actually increasing, really up to over 60% of the market, almost 2/3 of residential are going to be Enphase. And then Solar Edge, which has for many years been very competitive with Enphase as far as market share, has really fallen off significantly. And so is their stock price. So that tends to make me wonder, I mean, what's going on there? I talked to some people who install Solar Edge all the time, and it's not a product thing, I don't think. Not quite sure what's going on there. Then Hoy Miles. Hoy Miles is another microinverter company. I don't know if they do other things other than microinverters, but their big marketing is multi-panels hooking up to a single microinverter. So they're starting to cut into some of Enphase's market share, and then SunPower and Tesla really kind of round out as far as the inverters. Unless you're dealing with down in West Virginia there, and you get SMA and Fronius, that would fall in under the others. And then loans. Loans was another big issue in this particular report, and they talk about the high cost of financing. And we've seen this just really in 1 year, the price of money to install these systems going up from about 3% up to about 5.5%. So that obviously, while the price of the system may not go up, the cost of the system when you add in the financing is certainly going up. And I tried to do a little research as to how many of these systems are actually financed as opposed to people just paying outright. It was all over the place. I just thought I'd throw that number out there. It's that lies, damn lies, and statistics kind of thing. The company Solar Feed said 45% of them are financed. Wood Mackenzie said 70%. The Department of Energy said 85%. It was interesting. In some of these, they really talked about the difference between financing and lease purchase, or basically third-party ownership. I was surprised that because a good number of the folks I deal with, they're just paying for them out of pocket. So obviously, either I'm getting an unrepresentative sample of folks who have the money lying around to do this, or maybe their research ignores those folks. Anyway, that was the recap of the EnergySage. We've got about 2 or 3 minutes here. Anybody have any comments on the state of the industry or anything that I just went over? Yep. All right. Well, hearing none, we'll call it a day, and we'll see you guys all next week. All right. Thanks for your attention. Bye-bye.